like true creativity is doing something, showing someone a way of doing things that that had never been done before. So I think it's like breaking new ground, but that's kind of like true creativity, of the highest level, I think.
Growing up, I always wanted to create. I always was artistic, and I loved to draw. I loved to color. I would change my outfit 3 times a day because I thought my life was just a full-time fashion show. And I would beg my mom every chance I could to paint. I have always found a way to have some sort of creative outlet, and through my life, sometimes that took different forms, whether it was drawing or I took a coloring book everywhere I went. And through a phase of baking and cake decorating, starting a small cake decorating business at the age of 9 and selling cakes just to family friends. And then once I got into middle school, I had this craving to learn how to sew. So I taught myself how to sew, and by the time I reached high school, I started my own small business, and I was sewing children's boutique clothes at first. And I would go to craft fairs around Georgia, farmers markets around Georgia, just to put my stuff out there and let people see who I was, meet me, hopefully like my stuff, and just a way to make money as a young teenager. I'd like to say that I love learning, but I think if I was honest with myself, I love to learn things surrounding being creative, being artistic, creativity in itself. So once I got into college, I came to Brunel University to major in fashion design. The minute I got on ground at Brunel, I just completely immersed myself in all things creative studies. I loved fashion, of course, so that was like my main passion, but I wanted to learn how to better illustrate. I wanted to learn graphic design. I wanted to learn how to paint better, and I wanted to learn all things that I could surrounding art in itself, and also pushing myself and challenging myself creatively. I wanted to learn how to think more outside the box, and anything that could push my mind beyond what I already knew, I wanted to learn. Over my time at Brunel University, I realized that people would see a project, whether I was in a lab working on a project, or for some reason I was presenting a project, or even when I was at craft fairs and markets around Georgia selling things that I've made, people would come up and be like, oh my gosh, I love your stuff. I wish I could do that, but I'm not creative. Or, oh my gosh, I love this. I wish I could do something like that, but I'm not creative. And so I found that it was this underlying theme that people saw what I was doing or saw what someone else was doing that just has to do with being crafty or being artistic, and they immediately think to themselves, I can't do that because I'm not creative. And over the years, I've always questioned why, because the only thing standing out between me and a person that doesn't think they're creative is I may have a higher interest, and therefore I just want to learn more, and I may put more time into it, which is how I've gotten better at my craft. But really, that's about it. So I wanted to pose this question: why do people not think they're creative? And this is me finding out why. So through this research, you're going to see 4 participants who, in one way, shape, or form, don't believe they're creative. I'm going to ask them a set of questions, and we're going to hear their answers. Then, towards the end of this research, you're going to hear from 3 experts within the creative field. First being Claudia Wilburn, who's the chair of the Center for Arts and Design at Brunel University. Second being Dr. Maria Zayas, who is a psychology professor at Brunel University. And lastly, you're going to hear from Rod Junkins, who is a professor at Central St. Martin's in the UK and is a creative author.
Okay, my definition of creativity is originality. People that have a vision of scenes, things, items that they kind of put together Could make it pretty, make it different, make it original.
I think being creative is like being able to come up with ideas, like a bunch of ideas for art or for design or anything you're trying to do. Very nice.
I think creativity is someone or something that can look at an object or look at the world and kind of come up either with a solution for a problem that nobody ever has thought of, or they come up with a new product themselves.
I feel like it's like, and it's been hard for me, just experimenting and having fun and letting like loose and not having any like, I don't know, boundaries to hold you, and I don't know. And then I also think like, also I guess there's some structure, like it depends, like with designing, like you have like I don't know, the content that they want you to kind of follow, but then from there you can like kind of use your creativity to come up with different things in the standards. So I guess it depends on what you're doing.
So in thinking about creativity, I think about being able to put things together in new and different ways and not be caught into kind of old familiar patterns, but to be able to expand and to basically meet a new need in a different way. And it doesn't need to just be a need. For instance, in your field of the arts, creativity is used for creating beauty.
I would say creativity is the ability to think around a problem. It's not necessarily that you have the ability to draw, paint, or sing, or even write music. It's something that means that you can pick something up and you're not just looking inside of it, but you're looking around it, and you're trying to come up with solutions that are not necessarily the first thing that comes to mind or the thing that you think it is actually used for.
In your mind, what makes someone creative?
I think you're born with it. I mean, you could study it and learn it, but to be truly excel at it, I think it's innate. I think you're born with it. Like with other talents. You know, some people can't sing, but then somebody just at 5 years old can sing beautifully, so.
The ability to come up with new ideas like that, like just straight back to back, and to put it together, and like I think people who have a lot of motivation and just like a desire to learn more about what they're doing. So.
I think, like I said on the creativity, being able to look at a problem and to see things that nobody else thinks of, and yet they tend to work, and they're able to explain it in a way that the person they're talking to can get it to work.
I feel like, I don't know, maybe like just like knowing who they are and like being confident in who they are and not caring what people think is what can make somebody creative.
Tell me about why you would not consider yourself a creative person, or if there was a time you didn't think you were creative.
I'd like to think I'm creative. However, if I see something, I can recreate it. But right now, I can't really originate it. Frustrating, but...
I just don't think of myself as creative because, I mean, I don't have any like art talents, design talents, you know. I don't sing or anything. I don't really like write. I just am better at, I guess, more academic things like writing papers and for school and stuff like that. I'm not really good at coming up with a bunch of ideas and putting it together.
When I first sit down with a piece of artboard or a canvas, and the mind goes blank, and I can't come up with something out of the blue. I have to look at something else and get a kind of a place to start, and then I can change it to fit what I want to do.
So it's so funny. With my work, I feel like I'm creative, but when it comes to like my own stuff, I think it's all those things. Like I care what people think. I want my stuff to look like other people's stuff, and so from there, it like hinders myself. And then I'm also a perfectionist, so an artist who's a perfectionist is never a good thing. So like right now, I feel like that's like hindering like me as a creative, which is kind of frustrating.
Tell me about a time when you got lost in working on a project or lost track of time during a hobby.
Oh my goodness, lost in a project. Sometimes I do that when I'm reading or when I'm painting. I just stay up late till it gets done or till I feel that it's finished with.
I guess when I'm doing my schoolwork, I don't really think of what time it is or how long it takes me to do it. I just kind of get in the zone and start working, and I guess I just have like background noise going on. So probably just do my homework. I never think of what time it is. I'll be like 3 hours ago and I'm like, oh, maybe I should not do this anymore. Definitely writing papers. I love writing papers actually. So when I'm writing them, I kind of like do it all at once and then just get it over with.
There are plenty of times where if I get started on something, suddenly it's lunchtime and I don't want to stop, but I do. It's kind of like those things that I have to fix lunch, I have to eat. But yeah, and anytime, like if I'm taking an art class and it's a 2-hour class, that 2 hours just kind of goes fast. So I guess anytime I'm working on the art, time seems to pass quickly.
My favorite jobs are one where I did like graphics for cafeterias, and all I had was like mascots and colors. And then I like created a whole environment, and I could do whatever I wanted, which is really cool. And then I had another job where I would take like small businesses and like make direct mail pieces. So usually, most of the small business had like some elements, but then you had to make like it pop. So that was really fun.
Looking back, can you tell me about a time where you felt discouraged in your ability to think creatively or be creative?
When I tried piano lessons, I really tried piano lessons, and I'm like, oh my goodness. It's kind of like how I feel on my ukulele now. We're playing the ukulele. I'm supposed to play in a concert, and I'm like, oh, am I going to embarrass myself or anybody else? So my confidence level on that is a little bit low. I'm practicing, and I didn't quite give up on the piano, but
I don't know. Probably like high school, I guess. I was never in art or anything. So, you know, we just had like back-to-back assignments. No one was ever like pushing us to do like super creative writing or anything. So probably then, I guess.
When I'm trying to come up with, like we're going into drawing motion and ballerinas, and I don't know if I can do that. I'm willing to try, and sometimes it turns out better than I think, and sometimes it's a complete disaster. And I just laugh and say, well, next time I'll get it. I took an art class a long time ago, and he advertised the class as for any level, beginners, you know. And when he started explaining what we were going to do, I had no idea where to start, and this guy was not very helpful, and I have to admit I got up and walked out. It was just, I thought, I'm not going to be able to do this. Why waste my 2 hours? I wasted my money, I won't waste my time.
I feel like all through art school, teachers are pretty harsh. Like, teachers really stun your creativity, because I remember I had a paint class, and the teacher was terrible, some last time. and like it was the first like paint class ever, and he never told you what the difference between acrylic and oil, which is huge. It's a huge difference. And for some reason he never liked my art, so he would come and be like, tell me what was wrong with it. And then I remember we had one critique and he like stopped because he like hated it so much, and like that really put like I think a huge dent in my art, because I'm like, wow, like maybe I do suck. And then just like even with graphic design, like it took a lot to get my portfolio out there and like push my creativity. Like one of my portfolio teacher was good. He made it known. He's like, so I know you have creativity, but for some reason it's like stuck. Cause like when you go into all those like beginning classes and even the middle classes, like teachers don't like this font or they don't like this color and da 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 da. So like because they don't like this. And then a lot of them aren't there to help you. Like they're just like tell you, like I said, everything that's wrong, and you're like, okay. Yeah, there's one teacher that would just, you'd send her your stuff, and she'd be like, oh, it's okay, and then you get your critique back, and you'd have all these wrong things, and you're like, what? It was just, I don't know. I have such a weird, different style. Like even with like the traditional classes, like with the real life, all my stuff comes out really cartoonish. I don't know why, it just does. And then you have the teacher saying, well, it's good, but it's not this. So it's like, in a way, you're getting like put in this box, and it's like, you know, I don't know. I feel like with a good teacher, they'd be like, look, this is your thing. Let's like enhance that, because this is what your ability is. So yeah. And I think also what hinders that you say that, like my parents were never supportive. Like they had me in a box to where I'd be like a cheerleader, ballerina, and I totally went opposite of like art. Like that was my thing, and like my parents never like enhanced that. They never like kind of, but I had like I don't know, she's like a grandma, state grandma, make things easy, and she like pushed them to put me in art classes. But my parents just never like saw it as something that you would make as a career. So it's really cool now, because my dad did help me out through art school with that, and so he's like, I think now I can really see.
What is a common myth that you run into when it comes to people's perspective on creativity?
A lot of people have trouble with defining creativity. There are many people who I've heard where, let's say I was putting a puzzle together with some family members, and I had someone in that family come up and say, oh, y'all are so creative. All we're doing is looking at patterns, and it's something that anybody and everybody can do. And so that's kind of a common myth, is that creativity is prescribed, because it's not. It's very much, it has so much variety to it. It can be so many different things. My best friend's mother, we had a conversation at an art show a few nights ago, and she's like, oh, well, you're just so creative. I'm just not that creative. I looked at her and I was like, you are creative. Your creativity comes out in how you speak and the words you say. You are quite creative. You've just never fostered it, and you've never tried to do it in other aspects. This same person also makes crochet blankets, very large, beautiful crochet blankets. It's what she does. That's her stress relief, and whether she knows it or not, it is a form of creativity.
So I think a lot of people kind of get stuck. So there's a term I'm going to throw out at you in social psychology. There's a term called cognitive miser. And it describes the tendency that most people have to do the least amount of effort and to just kind of do what's necessary to survive. So people in general don't like to go beyond what is the least amount of effort, and that's being a miser with your thoughts. So it's only people that are willing to go beyond the minimal and to expand their thought processes and put effort into it that can go beyond that and begin to create new things, new knowledge, new art, new ways of relating. So I would say that for that reason of being cognitive misers, that people kind of attach themselves to that minimal function frame of mind, and they then believe that they cannot be creative. The brain is a very efficient organ, and it wants us to survive with the least amount of effort so that it can retain energy for whatever it needs. But the thing is that we need to learn how to use the brain rather than to get lost in its very practical, efficient ways. And so we can learn how to go beyond something if we deem it to be important. And so one is the belief that creativity is beyond our reach, and another is kind of challenging a belief that it isn't necessary, that that either things are just fine the way they are and why reinvent the wheel, as they say, or you can't teach an old dog new tricks. There's all kinds of sayings about people's beliefs in their own limitation and the need to stay in the present moment of their functioning without expanding.
So I think that it's very much a kind of combination of being very active and doing things and thinking while you're doing them. So I think most people have a sort of a kind of dreamy sort of fantasy idea about creativity, whereas I think it's really something it's quite down to earth, really. Just making things and getting materials and doing things.
In your professional opinion, what do you think stops most people from pursuing their own creativity, or what makes them believe they are not creative?
It's kind of a loaded question because there's a lot of things here. A lot of people are afraid. They're afraid of doing something wrong. And because they're so afraid of doing something wrong, they won't even try. So that's one of those things. Another would be support, whether it's friends or family, who say, oh, well, you can't do that because you're not going to make any money at it. You can't go to school to get an art degree because you're not going to be able to get a job with an art degree. These are myths. These are things that they're not true. You can get a master's degree in a science field and still not get a job necessarily. So there's a lot of different things there. Another is lack of persistence. When you first do something, you're not necessarily good at it because you have to learn the process. And learning that process takes time and it takes effort. And you have to do it again and again to build, let's say, muscle memory. So if we talk about drawing, almost anyone can draw. They just need to take the time to learn how to do it, learn how to hold a pencil, learn how to make a light line and a dark line. They have to want to learn how to do it. And again, it comes back to fear, is that if they do it once and they're not good at it, then they're going to just kind of walk away from the table and give up on it. It's not fair to the creative process. You have to be okay with the fact that the first time something happens, it's not going to be perfect. It's going to be a little wonky, and that's okay.
From a psychology perspective, we understand that people create what are called schemas in life. They're kind of little stories. They're ways of looking at the world, and we use it again for efficiency. So it is kind of a shortcut to get us somewhere quicker. So for example, after witnessing many animals with 4 legs, we don't immediately, after seeing something else with 4 legs, need to ask ourselves, oh, is that an animal? Is that, what is that? We can immediately say, well, that's probably an animal. Or, we have various schemas, like, well, that's a table. Or that's an animal. Is it furry? Okay, it's an animal. Is it wood? Okay, it's a table. So we have schemas that are meant to make our lives a little easier and more efficient. Again, the problem is we get kind of caught in our schemas and we don't challenge them. They're like triangles, or they're squares or circles. And so we have these things and we see reality through these schemas, these shapes. And so if we see something coming at us that's like an octagon, well, we're not disposed to consider that there might be something other than a circle, a triangle, or a square. So we try to fit it into one of those. And so it loses its uniqueness and individuality because we can't see its hexagonalness We can only see aspects of it that fit with our predisposed ideas about how life looks.
I think that it's usually pressure from schools and family, and a lot of the students who come to my university, some of them are quite mature, or so some of them have been kind of doctors and lawyers and done all kinds of other professions, and they've just got to a point where they feel frustrated, they feel creative frustration, and then they just have to go to art college. So I think people are told at school that creativity won't earn you money and that you won't get a job, but I see exactly the opposite going on really in a place like London. There's hundreds and hundreds of students leave the college I teach at, which is Central St Martin's, and there's hundreds of art colleges in England, and there's a huge film industry in England, and huge design industry. So I think it's kind of I think people are pressurized by their families who have families in school who have a cliched idea about what creativity is. Because if you look at the statistics, the number of students who get jobs after going to art college is really high, and then you look at other degree courses like geography or whatever, they're quite low. So I think it's just a strange kind of cultural thing really that's kind of lingered for decades.
Kind of as the cliche saying goes, anyone can cook. Do you believe that anyone can be creative, and why? Yeah, I do. I think because of my books, I kind of come from an art background, and I wrote them from that perspective. But a lot of people in different fields have read them and asked me to come into, various, like banks and hospitals and things, and teach creativity. And I think people definitely have it. Everybody has it within them. It's just, sometimes they're a bit afraid of it.
So creativity is the ability to think around a problem. Mm-hmm. So if we have the ability to think around a problem and thinking, we think about thinking and the idea of critical thinking, being able to look at a situation, an organism, a wardrobe, a whatever it is that is the order of the day. Critical thinking allows you to think through a problem. Creativity allows you to think around it. And so if you get to the point and you've gone through with the critical thinking kind of things, and then you let yourself continue, and then you go into some what ifs, then you might find yourself being creative without intending to do so. And so my guess is there are a lot of people who don't think that they are creative, who are dealing with creativity every day. They just don't know what it is. On the more practical side of things, in terms of creativity as an expression, or an ability to express what's inside. Okay, if we think about it that way, then I would say that yes, I would still say yes. Anyone can learn aspects of creativity to implement them. There's different methods that exist that kind of allow your brain to kind of open up and kind of move in different directions. If you learned a skill and you were able to understand that the first time you do it, you're not going to be perfect at it, but the more you spend time doing it, you learn those skills, you learn that ability. Then once you've learned the rules, then you learn to break the rules. And creativity is oftentimes breaking rules to positive effect.